Thank you all for joining us. I am Matthew Silverman, the Executive Director of the Haberman Institute for Jewish Studies, and I am honored to welcome Rabbi Vanessa Ochs back to our community. I look forward to learning with her as we explore the evolving rituals during these challenging times, when community, solidarity, and resilience are especially important. I would like to extend a special welcome to those of you new to the Haberman Institute. Our mission is to provide high-quality, in-depth encounters with Jewish thought, history, and culture. And I'm sure you will find all of these boxes checked with our lecture tonight. We invite you to learn more about the Haberman Institute programs and classes by visiting our website, habermaninstitute.org. I want to highlight one class that may be of interest to you. In June, Rabbi Osnat Elder will be teaching a 3-session course on Israeli identity. This will be a relevant and engaging opportunity to learn with an Israeli teacher. Our classes have fees, but fees should not be a barrier to enrollment, so please reach out to me if they are. At the same time, the Haberman Institute is funded by participants like all of you, and giving toward our scholarship fund is an excellent opportunity to support our work and your fellow community members. And now on to this evening. Thank you to Andrew R. Ammerman for sponsoring our Spring 2024 lecture series. He dedicates the semester's learning in loving memory of Josephine and H. Max Ammerman, Stephen C. Ammerman, and Avi West. As usual, ask questions using the Q&A button on your Zoom screen. Please be as concise as possible and use complete sentences. Questions will be discussed at the end of the lecture, but feel free to write them in anytime during the presentation. To begin our evening officially, I would like to extend a very special thank you to Or Kodesh congregation in Chevy Chase, Maryland, for partnering with us tonight. I now invite Rabbi Batya Glazer, Director of Lifelong Learning at Or Kodesh, to join us and introduce Rabbi Vanessa Ochs. Welcome, Rabbi Glazer.
Thank you, Matt. I'm Rabbi Batya Glazer, the Director of Lifelong Learning at Or Kodesh congregation in Chevy Chase, Maryland, and I'm honored to join you this evening on behalf of our community. Our continued partnership with the Haberman Institute on adult education initiatives are a pathway to connection, communication, and unity, and we are honored to continue working together. Or Kodesh congregation is deeply committed to learning, and this partnership makes it possible to bring excellent scholars and high-level learning on significant issues and ideas to our community and the wider Jewish community. We know that the world became a different place on October 7th, and we are all trying to make sense of our new reality. Ritual gives us the tools we need to come together as a community to face our world as we connect with our history, experience, and our community. Our speaker this evening offers us her expertise and special insight into how our community is moving forward. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker, Rabbi Vanessa Ochs. Rabbi Ochs is the Professor Emeritus at the University of Virginia Department of Religious Studies and currently the Sally Present Visiting Professor at Hebrew Union College, the Jewish Institute of Religion. Rabbi Ochs' books include The Passover Haggadah, a biography, Inventing Jewish Ritual, which was a winner of a 2007 National Book Award, Sarah Laughed, the Jewish Dream Book with Elizabeth Ochs, Words on Fire, and Safe and Sound. Her research investigates how new Jewish ritual, Jewish feminism, the Passover Haggadah, and Jewish material culture. She continues to explore the theme of Jewish sensibilities, which has become the central focus of the journal Shema and the work of the Lippman Counter Foundation, and is now featured as a curriculum produced by Hillel International. Thank you, Rabbi Ochs, for sharing your time with us. The Zoom screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Glazer. And I thank very much. I thank the staff of the Haberman Institute, Matt and Becky, for welcoming me to teach this evening. It is of course a great honor. The topic that I will speak about this evening is a difficult one. The rituals and practices that have emerged worldwide after October 7th. And I want to recognize from the very start that this material sets off a lot of feelings for all of us. And hopefully my presentation is one that focuses on a kind of an analytical gaze at these materials, which will help us create a little bit of distance, as we contemplate this enormous creativity that has taken place in our world since October 7th. So I'm going to be sharing my screen with you. Okay. That's not quite right. There we go. October 7th. I'm sure you remember where you were. We were crafting new and complex ritual responses practically immediately to what had happened and to the efforts to secure the return of the hostages. Who were the people who were crafting these rituals? They weren't just rabbis, they weren't just cantors. They were the kind of people that I would call first responders. And yes, they include our clergy and our teachers, but they also have included musicians, visual artists, poets, tour guides, yoga teachers, Pilates instructors, and all kinds of other creatives, and also people just like ourselves. And I'll ask you, as we look at some of the rituals that have been generated these many months, I'll ask you to keep your focus on how traditional Jewish rituals and practices and objects over these last months have been given new meanings, or let's say expansive meanings. So I study innovated Jewish practices, primarily the ones since the 1970s on. And I've always said that between 1970 and 2010, there was an extraordinary outburst of new ritual. But since October 7th, that dynamic creativity has expanded in ways that I could not have anticipated. Where were you on October 7th? I found myself in Congregation Beth Israel in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I don't usually look at social media or the news or my phone on Shabbat, but for some reason that morning I did. And the news that I saw, I tried to believe that it was not true, that it was a dream, and that when I got to synagogue that morning, in the local synagogue, Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah are observed on the same day. I've hoped that maybe I would discover I was just imagining it. And of course, it wasn't the case. And when I got there, our Rabbi Tom Guthertz, was about to begin Hallel, and he said to us, he said, "How can we say Hallel? How can we say Hallel today?" And I knew immediately that ritual change was about to happen. And I remembered a prayer by the American Israeli liturgist Alden Solovey, one that he wrote in 2021. And I read it to you. God from the heights of rejoicing, praise God from the depths of despair, praise God from the places between. We sing praises in a minor key, the key of heartbreak, with tropes of lamentation, but still praises. For beauty has not been lost, and hope has not been defeated. and love still shines, a beacon of tomorrow. And I will tell you, my friends, I was not thinking about those particular words at the top of my head. I knew they existed, but at that moment, there just seemed to be so much dissonance between the worry and the fear that I was feeling, that my fellow congregants were feeling. And our rabbi said, just look at the words of Hallel and let them reach out to you, let them speak to you, find what's there that can hold you up. Shortly after, Alden Salovey wrote yet another prayer song poem, Tears and Rain. God who makes the rain fall, God who makes tears on earth, send us your tears from heaven, but only if you send them as blessings, only if you send them as signs that you will be with us as we defend our nation, that you will be with us as we fight to end the terror that dwells in our midst, the terror that still lurks at our doorstep. And as you look at these words and you look between these words, you can see how the mood of October 9th is there. Perhaps a sense that defending the nation and ending terror was going to be swift. I think I feel that between those words. That very day, our rabbi was inventing new Simchat Torah rituals instead of leading us as we sang and danced with the Torah. And perhaps this is what happened in your synagogue, is we walked around, we said the prayers quietly. We walked around 7 times with our Torah scrolls, but there was no jolly singing, and our feet knew no dances that day. So very soon, and perhaps you recall how quickly it happened, there were posters that were created and designed by a group of Israelis, Nitzan Mintz and Didi Band-Aid, who were sort of like street poets, and their colleagues, the designers Tal Huber and Shira Gershoni, who I believe were in Israel at the time. They created the posters that have become iconic, representing the kidnapped hostages brilliantly, and it's a brilliant, bold design with information about each hostage. You can imagine how hard they worked to get the information, to get the pictures. It was a stunning effort. And what they did is they created on social media a website where you could download this information for free to make your own posters, to print them out. And within, immediately, these posters were appearing everywhere, and they were more than posters. They were, perhaps there's a Yiddish word, pashkevelim. They were signs, they were announcements, and they were about protest, and they were also, as I said, they were prayers. There was music of this time. Initially, we drew upon music that was classic to Israel, that reflected both hope and resilience. Perhaps you know Naomi Shemer's song "Al Kol Elah," and we'll listen in a moment to Cantor Angela Buchdahl from Central Synagogue in New York, singing it when she went on a mission with fellow Reform rabbis, a very early mission to Israel. The words, "Every bee that brings the honey needs a sting to be complete, and we all must learn to taste the bitter with the sweet. Keep us, O Lord, the fire burning through the night and through the day for the man who is returning from so far away. Al Kol Elah, Al Kol Elah." For the sake of all these things, and I move down, for all these things, Lord, let your mercy be complete. Bless the sting and bless the honey. Bless the, and we'll just move to the, we'll move to Rabbi Buchdahl singing this. Just trying to move to the next slide. A little stuck there. Another song that emerged in this period was one also drawn from a familiar repertoire, like a prayer, and that was sung by this amazing group, Kululam, which has for many years has gathered together diverse groups of Israelis in order to sing together as one community. The message, of course, was bring them home now. I just want to stop sharing for a moment and I want to stop sharing for a moment and recap what we've been looking at so far. We have seen on Simchat Torah, we've seen a traditional ritual being switched, being the hakafot, the processions, being somewhat modified. We saw something that seemed brand new, these posters, which were a way of communicating hope. But then when we saw Al Kol Ela being sung, which is in Israel, it has a mixed status. It's not just a popular song. It has a quasi-religious quality to it. So all kinds of resources were being drawn upon in order to answer the question, what do we do now? How do we express our feelings? How do we express support of the hostage families? And how do certainly we who live outside of Israel, how do we join with our brothers and sisters in Israel in expressing support for them, very aware of that distance, aware, I believe, as well, that the experience of Israelis was something that we could empathize with, deeply empathize with, but we couldn't know in exactly the same kind of way. So maybe there was a kind of a tentativeness in our first gestures of response. Let me return now to these images. One of the, I'm not going to be playing this song, but a very significant prayer that has been used around the world is Achenu. And here we see an image of the rabbi and cantor of Central Synagogue singing it together on the bima from the altar to their congregation. I think it's something after this webinar, you might want to notice, look up Achenu and see all the different ways that this prayer has been sung about this holding up the notion that when we reach out for the return of hostages, we do so as this is the Pidyon Shavu'in, that this is such a high mission of a central mission of Jewish action. very soon, and I would not be surprised if many of you have these, I guess we would call them dog tags, all over. There were these metal tags. I wish I could see your faces and see your hands, because I bet there are so many of you that that have these. Halev Shalanu im Israel. Some will say Halev Shalanu Shavui Ba'aza. Our hearts are being held captive in Gaza, and then bring them home now. And you certainly, they've become made in all kinds of types and styles. And when you see someone wearing one, it's sort of wearing the notion of wearing your heart on your sleeve. You know exactly what you're feeling, and certain and after and perhaps you've seen this yourself. Any number of the hostage families have suggested putting on your clothes every single day a new piece of tape with the number of days that the hostages have been missing. We see this too as a prayer, as a protest, as a sign, to use the Hebrew word oti. It is a sign of believing that one day the hostages will come home, and it's a sign as well of our solidarity, not just with them, but with the hostage families. Prayers for the release of hostages emerged. Some came out of Israel, and there's one that was created, that was written by Rabbi Ofer Beit Halachmi and translated by Rabbi Rachel Shabbat Beit Lachmi, Beit Halachmi. And I read a little bit of this. Our God, the one who raised Joseph up from the pit, be a refuge for the oppressed, a refuge in time of trouble. Send complete rescue and full redemption to all those being held captive by the enemy. Strengthen their spirit and bring them our prayers, that they be protected from all harm. Implant understanding in the heart of the enemy, that they may return the captives in wholeness of body and spirit. Grant wisdom to the Israel Defense Forces, that they may secure freedom for the captives without loss of life. Grant strength of spirit and courage of heart to all the sons and daughters of Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar, to release bonds of captivity and allow all of us all, to live in freedom. Particularly beautiful prayer. And as I read it, I feel, I certainly feel my heart quaking. As it's a very, I've never had a more difficult time being a scholar of new ritual than in this period where the situation, where a situation is still unfolding in such a challenging way. And what we see in both of these prayers is we see the image of Joseph being raised from the pit. We see words from different Psalms being held up. We see something that it's probably dawning on you, like, oh, okay, resources from the broadest Jewish toolbox are being resourced in order to create the rituals of this time. In this case, we have Hebrew language. In this case, we have Jewish texts. We have as well the practice of offering constant prayer. After October 7th, I thought to myself, what is going to be the first major ritual that emerges? And I'm usually a very bad guesser at what a new ritual would be. And when a new ritual emerges, I often don't get that it's going to matter. I was the first person to say that the orange on the Seder plate would definitely not catch on. And there you have it. But it struck me that it was very possible that a ritual or a practice linked to the release of the hostages would have something to do with a chair. with Elijah's chair. We probably are all familiar with the idea of Elijah, a cup for Elijah being set at the Seder table, and we open the door for Elijah with the hope that Elijah this time will come and create a redeemed world. The hope that Elijah will not just come and have some wine at our house, but that Elijah's presence is the harbinger of a messianic era or a fully redeemed world, however one might want to address this very pervasive Jewish belief. And what we have in front of you is I have one Elijah's chair from the Israel Museum that would be used at a Brit Milah, at a circumcision for a baby boy, and his naming. And we see a baby naming chair that Toby Kahn created that was used for a Simchat Bat for his daughter, I believe his daughter Maddie. So this ritual of inviting Elijah in, who to be in this particular case for the baby, Elijah is thought of as the guardian angel of vulnerable babies. So again, it would not be a surprise to me, I thought, if something involved a chair. And then I thought that empty chairs are also iconic images in the Jewish protest vocabulary. For instance, in the years that we were working so hard to bring in the era of Soviet Jewry to bring those Jews out of the former Soviet Union to Israel, to America, to where they wish to be. Often at Passover Seders, there would be empty chairs remembering Soviet Jewry. And there would also, perhaps you may recall, not all that long ago, an empty chair stood for the release of Israeli soldier held captive for 5 years, Gilad Shalit, who was then ultimately released. On October 20th, in front of the Tel Aviv Museum, and worldwide in so many different sites, there was an empty Shabbat table, an incredible, artistic, religious, ritual installation. And I'm making slashes between all of those because it is all of those things. And I think we have to think a little bit of the context that in Israel, more so than in America and among American Jewry, in Israel, lots of people, whether if you're observant or not, lots of people go home for Shabbat dinner to their families. You might go out clubbing afterwards, but you go out for Shabbat dinner. So this idea, this notion of a Shabbat dinner where that would of the hostage families or of soldiers in the IDF who were serving, the soldiers who were on reserve who had been called up. This notion of empty seats was very loud in the Israeli public. And there was a group. If what I read is correct, what I learned from Israeli news, there was a group called Darkenu, which is a social justice, a social activism group in Israel. And I was listening to a broadcast, and one of the leaders of this group, Noam Dweck, was speaking, and he said at that time he and members of his group reached out to the hostage families and said, "What can we do? We will do anything." And together with the support of the hostage families, there were multiple creatives who came up with this notion of an empty Shabbat table that could be replicated. And on websites and social media, you could find out what were the requirements. You needed 20 rectangular tables, 5 to 30 baby seats, 203 white ceramic plates, 203 forks and knives, 60 flower assortments, 20 chalot, of course, the posters of the hostages, and these appeared all over. And I imagine that there are many of you who have seen these. And the image that we're looking at right now, and the most heartbreaking part, of course, is the bottles and the seats for babies with little bibs. And there are also children's tables for the older children. And this was placed in what has become Kikar HaChatufim, Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, outside the Tel Aviv Museum, which has become a site of prayer, activism, mourning, hope, engagement, artistry, and so much more. What happened around these tables was not just people, was not just the table itself. People, this is an image taken at the Lincoln Memorial, October 27th in Washington, D.C. People would mill around. There would be speeches. There would be essentially a media event. It would be an opportunity to have talks about terrorism, extremism, the global fight for building a positive future for all. I'm quoting from the text, the text of Darkenu, and the instructions: take a picture, put it on your Facebook page. And I think we all realize that Facebook, Instagram, and whatever social media, TikTok that we were using or looking at, these became with the images that were being posted. These were images of these were religious objects. And I know we have a separation between, we might, of course, we're going to distinguish a Sefer Torah scroll and a mezuzah, but there are other kinds of Jewish objects in our world that become incredibly meaningful to us. And this empty Shabbat table was one. And perhaps some of you have seen that over time, this Shabbat table has become less and less beautiful when it has been placed, when it has been erected. And sometimes it will show it will just be sandy and have a small bottle of water, or the meager portion of bread that we understand the hostages are receiving. These installations were all over the place. We see one on the right in Times Square, and on the left on my own campus at UVA, because of the challenges of logistics, the Hillel students gathered balloons and of course used the posters as their expression of hope and solidarity. Starting soon after October 7th, every week in front of the house of Mr. Gutierrez, the Secretary General of the UN, there was a tree filled with origami birds of peace. And Israelis gathered and spoke about the individual hostages, pleaded with Mr. Gutierrez to address this crisis. The day I was there, there were a lot of yellow balloons. And as the site was breaking up, I saw someone gathering up the balloons and placing them next to a birthday cake for one of the young hostages who has since, thank God, been released, as a kind of a surrogate birthday party for her. Perhaps you were there on November 14th. And you remember in Washington, D.C., for the demonstration at the National Mall in Washington, D.C. And you might ask, is a demonstration a Jewish ritual practice? And that's something we can talk about together. I'd be very interested to hear about your own experiences. Did you experience this event as a ritual practice? I'm not going to necessarily say a religious practice, because rituals can have all kinds of meanings that some are ritual, some are religious, some are spiritual. And for many of you may have experienced this, going there, even taking a very long bus ride as a spiritual practice of solidarity and community. And I place an image from the Or Kodesh sponsors for this evening from your website, your synagogue's website, in which members of your synagogue were gathering every single week in solidarity and in protest and in a kind of prayerful, loyal solidarity. Perhaps you've seen these images. If you haven't, I understand that they take your breath away. There was a new exhibit at the National Library of Israel as its reading room was created, restored, renovated, and the librarians worked so very hard to create this stunning practice of a row of chairs, concentric row of chairs, and the librarians had studied up on the reading tastes of the different and the interests of the different hostages and the personalities of the wee ones, of the little ones. And on each chair, there was a book placed, and of course a poster for each hostage, with the demand, with the request, bring her home now, bring him home now. When in November, Alden Solovey saw the same news that we saw, that 13 hostages had been released, he created this new poem, and he was writing poem prayers every single day. And I just read this one, remembering, because it helps us remember that time, what it felt like. 13 birds flew from the depths of darkness to the light of home. How much like a vision of glory, like the dawn of creation, when birds first took flight to see their faces, free birds again to see their families, hold them and bring them close, paths of hell, into the arms of love, into the bosoms of our people. Meanwhile, all kinds of different protests were emerging, and I share this image of a protest that was on, I believe it was Governor's Island. The Israeli New York artist Ronit Levin Delgado created a walk of protest with mouths being silenced, and it's certainly worth looking at her work. As I mentioned before, Kikar HaChatufim in front of Tel Aviv Museum became the central place for gathering, and certainly became a place for gathering for all of the many people from around the world who came to Israel on mission trips, and I'll speak about that in a moment. And this is a picture taken by the American scholar Alana Cooper, who together with Professor Karen Peleg-Friedman in Israel are doing an extensive project of mapping mapping the rituals that are taking place in Israel, and how many of these rituals are addressing the ongoing trauma of Israelis. Alana Cooper told a story about one particular rabbinite, Alana Sharbat. Alana Sharbat has organized prayers every week, every Shabbat since October 7th. And would begin with a Kabbalat service there would be song and a lot of participation. But she discovered that after a while, people would sort of leave the site, and there wouldn't be enough people to have a minyan, to have the quorum of 10 necessary for the rest of the service. And Professor Cooper reports that Anat Sharbat turned to Rabbi Sperber, her rabbi, for guidance, and he said, "Look around you. Only a few of the white chairs were occupied, but the rabbi pointed to the many others wandering around the plaza, all focused on and concerned about the fate of Israeli citizens who had been abducted, there was a minyan present in the square, even if not in the plastic chairs, Sperber ruled. So the service continued that day, and Shabbat has used the same reasoning ever since. Traditional Jewish prayer has not been the only kind of spiritual gathering in Hostages Square in the honor of a yoga teacher named Carmel Gat. People have gathered to perform to do yoga together, and on this one particular day, on January 22nd, people gathered to do 108 sun salutations in order to mark 108 days of captivity of the teacher. Perhaps you've heard as well that in Hostages Square, there's also a piano. And on the piano, as you can see, is a sign that says, "You are not alone." And this is linked to a gifted pianist and musician named Alon Ohel, who's 22, and anyone can come and sit down and play and sing and express their hope that Alon and all the others will be brought home safely. Another Jewish practice that has emerged, and this should not come as a surprise to anyone, is the mission trip. I just pulled up this mission trip for which congregation is this one? Adas Israel in Washington, D.C. It's a mission trip that has already happened. That's one on the right, and the one on the left is a mission trip that OKC is holding at this very moment. And there's certain characteristics of these mission trips. They are often organized by a tourist group. Kesha does a lot of the organizing, and there's a kind of a system to them. They are brief. The goal is to have an impact for those who are on the mission. They are told in going that they will comfort evacuees and that they will help the families of the hostage and the wounded, that they'll volunteer in some way, that they will help various organizations and show solidarity. I have not been on such a mission, so I can't speak in person about what the experience is like, and I certainly can't speak about what is the experience like for the Israelis, these soldiers or these spokespersons who are greeting one mission after another. And my guess is there's probably a kind of a mixed feelings of these kinds of gatherings, which are ongoing. And I just posted for you a sense of the very, very busy itinerary that one would carry out on such a mission. And I'm going to skip to Hanukkah. And in the next slides, and in this last group of slides, what I want to share with you is a different set of understandings of how ritual has been turned, how we have turned to ritual in order to reflect on October 7th. And as a rabbi, this should have been very obvious to me. What do we do when we are challenged throughout a year? And I don't know that we ever thought how many months we would be engaged. This would be a part of our every single day lives. We knew the grief would last forever, but we didn't know that the hostages would still be, so many hostages would still be kept from us. But what do rabbis do? What do individual Jews do? When our holidays come, we move between the events of the moment and the themes of the holiday. And here you see before you, it's Hanukkah of this past year. And we see in Hostages Square, we see family members of hostages lighting a Chanukiah. We see on the right side, we see messages of love. We see another kind of a Chanukiah, a menorah being lit, and we see musicians. And if we talk about Hanukkah as a time of hope, we were never doing it in my lifetime on a Hanukkah in quite this kind of way. And then came Purim. And I share this image from an organization that you may know, if you are in the DC area, an extraordinary organization called Sviva, founded by Ariella Markowitz and Rabbanit Aliza Sperling. Ever since October 7th, well, this was a group that met beforehand, but ever since October 7th, this organization has met online to teach deep women's Torah, linked to October 7th, and the teaching has been extraordinary and diverse. And in preparation for Purim, there was an evening of Purim learning. Those of you who were preparing for Purim this past year know that it was a different kind of Purim, the holiday which is generally about drunkenness and festivity and letting go. It was we couldn't celebrate in that kind of way, and moreover, many people gathered in study beforehand to look at the next to last chapter of the Megillah, which is filled with revenge. And it became an important topic for discussion. How do we think about, in this time in the lives of our people, how do we reflect upon inherited notions of revenge, which was and remains a very deep challenge. And I recommend to everyone that as we move on to new holidays, that you check out the website of sviva.org in order to learn about more ways in which you can learn deeply. Passover, of course, we all knew that Pesach would be different. Our seders would be different, and we have an image right here of something that we could have all have said, yes, of course, at Pesach seders there will be empty chairs for the hostages. We will remember them in that kind of way. And maybe we're even remembering how perhaps at a Pesach Seder in our own life, a Passover Seder, a meal, what it was like that first Seder after, say, a grandfather or a father or a mother had died, and we had to keep their chair open because it just wasn't, we just had to honor them in that kind of way. And we see here that image of the empty chair. Again, there were new tables set up, and this is in England on Downing Street. At this time, where there are at that time, there's the understanding that there were 133 hostages. Yet another table was set up for their release. Every single year, there are new texts that offer a different take on Pesach, something new and a new twist. And my goodness, this year we saw not just a hope for a new twist, but we understood that we could not observe Pesach in quite the same way. In Israel this year, a new Haggadah was created in a different voice, I believe it was called, by Noam Tzion and Mishael Tzion. And this year they created an English, it was available for free for everybody. They created English additional texts and with poetry and ways to remember, in particular, ways to think about the kibbutzim that had suffered so grievously. Kibbutzim where members are still in temporary dwellings. We have here a picture of a Seder plate, a traditional Seder plate, and knowing full well that just as we have added oranges and beets and tomatoes and olives in the last year to think about other aspects of our social activism and our spiritual activism, this year there was a suggestion that we add new ritual objects. Rabbanit Leah Sarna encourage people to put mirrors on their table. And that comes from texts in Midrashim about what did the Israelite women do in the time of the slave women. They use mirrors of beautification in order to believe that there would be procreation, that there would be more Jewish babies, and in memory of the significance of the Israelite women and Pesach, Rabbanit Sarna suggested that we put a mirror on the table. A group called the Jewish Women's International suggested that we add flowers as a way to stand in solidarity with the women of Israel and to honor the memory of those who were lost and those who are being kept hostage. I was very struck by a supplement by a group called the I Center, and this was created. This supplemental text was created well aware that the theme, I think that we were also aware of this past Passover, is that people were going to be coming to our Seder tables who might feel very differently than we do. People of different ages, people of different political, religious perspectives, and this set of supplemental materials created ways in which we could safely, comfortably, respectfully prompt conversation and respect with it in our own groups. In this particular set of images, in particular slides I'm about to show you, the organization suggested that we think about certain images together and how these images speak to us and encourage us to act and engage. And we see one image on the left of someone playing in Hostages Square, remembering Alon Ohel, who is being kept hostage, and also we see the time clock, the timeline in Hostages Square, counting up the amount of time the hostages have been in custody. And in the supplement, it's what do these images spark for you? And perhaps that's something that we can talk about in our conversation. Yom HaShoah was just last week. And didn't we know it? Didn't we just know that this horrible day of remembrance would be remembered in a way that was different than in the past? And perhaps many of you are aware of just how often Israelis are referencing the theme of Shoah, of Holocaust, since October 7th. The artist in residence at Yad Vashem, Shai Azulai, was quoted as saying, "We experienced a sample of the Holocaust. We got a sense as a people of what it means to experience a pogrom, and we were in shock, as though our limbs had been amputated, and it was a wake-up call." And just last week, at the ceremony at Yad Vashem, remembering those who were murdered in the Holocaust, we see yet again a yellow chair reserved for the hostages. We hope and pray that they will return home. Soon enough, it will be Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut, the Tel Aviv Pride Parade, Shavuot, Tisha B'Av, and what we've learned thus far is that every one of our holidays or communal practices gives us yet another option to draw upon our communal, historical, sacred, I might say, resources in order to hold us together, have hope, and build resilience. And isn't that what our rituals do? Isn't that what they do best? Is at times when we don't know where to go or what to say or what even to feel, they tell us, cover the mirror, bring over food, tear a collar. We have practices that give us guidance in the moment and traditional forms of wisdom. And I close with images that are of the right now. One image is of supporters of Israel at University of Pittsburgh. One image of Jewish students who are protesting Israel at Columbia University at their Seder. This is ongoing right now. We all have, I'm imagining that we have many complicated feelings about these current practices, which some might call a ritual. And protest, of course, is a ritual. Social action, of course, is a ritual. I want to end my presentation and move to questions with a text that was just put out by a beautiful organization called One Table, which helps folks, which supports folks with financial supplements and also materials who want to be hosts for Shabbat and have Shabbat guests. And they created a multi-page teaching called Why Shabbat, Why Now? And they asked this question for people to say while they are lighting the Shabbat candles, blessed is the oneness that makes us holy through commandments and commands us to kindle the light of Shabbat. Baruch atah Hashem Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. How can we offer light in this moment to those closest to you first, and then to your wider concentric circles of care? How could this look in moments of joy? How about in moments of loss? How can offering light in moments of crisis feel like a radical act? And then this wonderful provocative question, which I hope that we feel that we can answer now. Do you feel old rituals can be given new meanings over time? Can they hold us together in new ways? Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Ochs, for such an engaging talk filled with many, many meaningful images and stories to share. I invite everyone to continue to send in questions. This will be a great opportunity to discuss things in more detail and hear your thoughts.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks. The first question here to get us started is if you could just define ritual.
I would define ritual as a repeated practice, which could have meaning just for one person. Say the ritual of brushing your teeth, or the ritual of having coffee in the morning. And these are not small things. It matters that you have your coffee in the morning. It matters that you brush your teeth. And it matters beyond just that you need the caffeine. And it matters just that you need to get your teeth clean. It's how you understand your being human every single day. Of course, when we have a ritual that belongs to our family, to our community, to our tribe, to our nation, these rituals can potentially have enormous power and resonance because they matter not just to us, but they matter to the group. And they may even if it's a religious ritual, it may have the additional power of its being commanded that we need to do this thing. And if we fail to do this thing, there's a kind of disruption or brokenness or disorder. And a ritual could be something that we say, something that we sing. It could be a ritual object. It could be something that we cook, we bake, like a matzah. And then, of course, there are life cycle rituals, right? There's rituals that are linked in any community, any tradition, to birth and to death and to coming of age.
Thank you. As a follow-up here, someone asks, how would you see Jewish ritual differ from secular ritual?
Many Jewish rituals are connected to Jewish history, our history as a people, and they will be linked to both our sacred texts and also to minhag, M-I-N-H-A-G, to minhag, to beloved practices and customs that may or may not be written down, that may have been passed on by our great grandmothers and down and down and down. And these practices are as beloved and can be as beloved and as significant, and in some families even more so than ones that we find commanded in text. I remember my mother once said, "Where in the Torah, I don't have a chicken, where in the Torah does it say you have to have a chicken for Shabbat?" And I said, "It doesn't say it in the Torah." And she said, "But it must. It must." I said, "No, Mom, it doesn't say it in the Torah. You can have fish." And she said, "I'm going to ask my rabbi." I mean, she couldn't believe me, and she went out and she got chicken that day because ritual had that power. It had that sense of holding her together, keeping her trust with those who came before in her Jewish world.
Thank you. Can you speak? I mean, you mentioned a few examples of this, but there's a question here. If you could speak more to the power of ritual to serve as a connector between Israeli Jews and diaspora Jews.
Oh, it's a very beautiful question, and I thank very much the person who conceived it. How do we show our hope? How do we show our connection? Perhaps many of you called up every Israeli person you knew, your friends, your relatives, and we called them up at first, and we texted them, and maybe we didn't do it. We haven't done it as often as we did at first, and perhaps the response you got back was never, "No, I'm too busy," or "You have no idea what we're feeling." It was so often, "Thank you. Thank you for knowing what we're feeling." Just as when after October 7th, so many of my colleagues, not Jewish colleagues, reached out to me, and those calls held me together. So I'm hoping that I'm hoping that our rallies and our protests and our Shabbat tables and what we're doing here are signal to our Israeli brothers and sisters that they are not alone, but we're also very aware that we're not there. And we can knit a lot of caps for soldiers and knit and crochet a lot of dolls for children. We can send supplies, we can send money, and we're not there. And that's a gulf that it doesn't mean we care less, but that it's a real distinction, and one that I've long respected.
Yes, thank you. Somebody asked the question that you ended with on, do you feel that old ritual can be given new meaning over time? You want to elaborate on that?
I do. I've seen so many rituals of the past serve as resources for very contemporary practice. And I'll just give an example. When I don't know if my grandmother went to the mikveh or not, in New Jersey. But she did say to one of her daughters-in-law, you don't have to do this. And this was in an Orthodox community, a traditional community. I grew up as a conservative Jew. I never even heard of the mikveh. Maybe there was a class on conversion, and someone mentioned dip in a mikveh, but I didn't know. I had never heard of this ritual bath. Well, in the last years, Anita Diamond, the author of The Red Tent, the author of The New Jewish Wedding, a book that I always use with couples who might prepare for marriage. She and her cohort in Boston created a place called Mayim Chaim, living waters. But it was also a way of, in my understanding, it was a way of saying, we are resurrecting the mikveh. We are bringing it back. And while it can be used still for conversion and can be used in preparation for holidays and can be used by women who are marking the end of menstruation, it can also be used for when you've finished chemotherapy or when you are about to be ordained as a rabbi or as a rabbinite, or it can be used before, during, and after you're transitioning from one gender to another. And so it's been a rich, I think this is just one example of a ritual practice that was certainly, it remains well and alive in certain Jewish communities, but it began to have possibilities and resonance in liberal communities as well. I would say as well that if another strong example of an old practice that's become new is the Pesach Haggadah, the Passover Haggadah, the text, which when I was growing up, you had the Manischewitz, you had the Maxwell House or the Fortunoff text before you, and Grandpa sat at the front and mumble all the way through it, and that was that. And in our age, thanks to a particular website called Haggadot.com, anyone can make their own Haggadah, and they can make a Haggadah that is not grandpa's Haggadah, not your grandpa's Haggadah, not your grandma's Haggadah, but one that speaks to who you are now. It speaks to the spirituality of your world, and certainly all of the examples of Haggadah supplements that I shared this evening speak to that that act of taking an older traditional religious ritual practice that, or in this case, a ritual text that was linked to the practice of the Passover Seder, and said, who are we now? What needs to be said? What needs to be asked? What kinds of new lessons can we learn from a precious ancient tradition? At our own Pesach Seder, which this year was led by, one of them was led by my teenage granddaughter. She asked us to go around and talk about what was renewing in our lives right now. And we went around and we shared it, and I felt so very proud of her, because that's parsley, right? That's karpas. That's springtime. And I think she realized that we needed to bring as much joy as we could to this Seder, to hold our hearts up with hope and resilience.
Thank you. Yes, I was a student at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College for a time, and so reconstructing or re-envisioning ritual and prayer sits at the heart of it. And
Yeah.
I just want to mention one other resource. You mentioned a couple, ritualwell.org, which I believe is run by the
that emerged in the Reconstructionist movement, and it's an extraordinary resource. One you can receive good stuff from, but one you can also contribute to.
Yes, yeah, thank you. And as a follow-up question here, somebody asked, as a rabbi, do you feel there is a line that can't be crossed in recreating or giving new meaning to traditional Jewish ritual? I'm thinking of anti-Zionists rewriting the Seder, but I am interested in even broader examples of this.
you can create a ritual, a new ritual that I might think is absolutely beautiful and meaningful. You might decide to take Birkat Hamazon, the grace after meals, and use feminist or non-gendered God language. You might choose to translate it into English. I might find that quite beautiful and moving, but I can assure you that there will be someone else who not only won't feel comfortable at first, and we all feel uncomfortable at first when there's a new ritual. I hate anything new. I confess, any new ritual I've ever seen is like, oh, no, that's not good at all. That doesn't work for me. That's a bomb. I might even go far as saying, oh, that's heretical. That's an abomination. And I do it the second time. It's like, oh, I see. I get it. The third time I'm already leading it, and I get it. So I think that I think there, when we engage with traditional Jewish resources, yes, it's very possible that the new ritual that we coin will be troubling to somebody else. But I think we need to think about how, if you think about the denominations of American Jewry, Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, Reconstructionist, that all of these groups have different prayer books. And one would look at the other prayer book and say, well, that doesn't work. That's not right. That makes me uncomfortable. And that's why we have differences. I would say that when creating a new ritual, that's a public ritual, that it's very important to let people know beforehand that there will be a new ritual, to prepare them for it, to ask them if they're willing to engage in it, to give them the opportunity to not be part of it if it makes them uncomfortable, because ritual is a precious thing. It's sort of like, you're having a birthday party, and instead of a birthday cake and your kid is 6 years old, you present them with a pastrami sandwich. Like, not fair, or just not fair. People should be warned. And I think as part of the teaching process, I think one also can be told, I know this will make you feel uncomfortable. I recognize that. And it's possible that when we do it again, you might feel more comfortable. And that's exactly what I was told by a group of Jewish feminists convened by Rabbi Deborah Orenstein many, many years ago. We were creating a book on Jewish feminist ritual. And I was at my first prayer service that used only women's female language for God. And we were together for about 3 days. And the first day I just cringed. Like, this isn't prayer. Like, what is this? Like, this is political activism. And by the third day, I was praying along and I was saying to myself, yes, prayer and political activism can be one and the same thing. And I've said those prayers so many times now that it's just praying. It's just plain praying. So we do get used to innovations, and they become new. They become Rav Kook has, according to Rav Kook, the old becomes new, and the new becomes holy. I've probably quoted that wrong, but you get the gist.
Yes, thank you. This conversation has spurred a few more questions. One is, can repurposed ritual undermine the historicity of the older meaning of the ritual? For example, can we lose leaving Egypt?
We cannot lose leaving Egypt. We will always be leaving Egypt. But I'll tell you, if we repurpose the matzah, if we're thinking, say, about repurposing the matzah in some kind of way, a very close reading of Exodus will show that even in just the text of Exodus, matzah is used in different ways. So even in this or text, this central beginning text, in which we begin to think about, like, what were our people doing with flatbread? They were eating flatbread before they even went to Egypt. Like, oh, and there's two scenes. In one scene in the Exodus text, we're seeing the Israelites eating before they leave Egypt, they're eating matzah with the sacrifice. And then later we're saying, oh, they're having matzah, they're eating matzah because they couldn't get their baking done beforehand. So wait a second. So what's matzah? So even this central object, this matzah, has a lot of changes over time. And there is something that I often say to my students who are studying ritual in any tradition is there is no real first time essential, the right meaning of a ritual. Every ritual practice has complex origins. No ritual has one single meaning. The fancy academic word we use is polysemic. Any ritual practice has multiple meanings, not just for this time and place, but also for us. The way that I will mark Yom HaAtzmaut this year will be very different because of my age, because of who I'll be with, what community I'll be with, that we change over time, and hence the rituals that we observe change with and through us.
Yes, thank you. Another question here. At what point does a ritual become a tradition? And as I heard that question, I thought it reminded me of, I don't know if this is true or not, but it reminded me of Debbie Friedman, how some of her songs in the Reform movement have become pretty ingrained in the service. But I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Well, there's a French saying, une fois n'est pas coutume. You do something once, and it's not a custom. In Jewish tradition, we say 3 times is a chazaka. You do something 3 times, and it becomes a tradition. So if you, Matt, come to my house on Shabbat, and we have babka, week 1, week 2, week 3, we keep having babka. You coming to my house and having babka on Shabbat becomes our tradition. A new ritual becomes a tradition when we embrace it. I can't guarantee that it will always stay with your group, with your crowd, but it's repetition that gives us a feeling of it's repetition and added on resonances that create that traditional feeling. And some people will say, is it authentic? And I've always long claimed that authenticity when it comes to ritual is a feeling and not a fact. It's a ritual practice feels authentic Jewishly authentic, when we are performing it, knowing it with a sense of Jewish history, Jewish languages, Jewish themes, and Jewish peoplehood. Thank you.
Thinking back to how rituals change over time, someone wrote a response about that they were taught that prayer is a man's responsibility, not a woman's. I only know one Yiddish prayer by heart, and I resent feminists demanding that I take responsibility for men's burden. How do you respond to this position?
Well, I wish I could sit with that person and tell that person that the first prayer we have, the person who we think of as being the originator of prayer in sacred text is Hannah. Hannah, the woman who goes to the temple and prays for a child. We all pray if we wish. We are all called to pray. Yes, I know. Yes, I know. In certain communities, men are counted in a prayer quorum, and that has changed over time. But we are all in Jewish tradition. All are called upon to pray. The person who says the blessing over the Shabbat candles is praying. The person who says Shema at night is praying. Yes, there are practices of private prayer and communal prayer, but praying is praying. We're all called upon to pray and are free to pray. And like the many rabbis who created our Sidurim, we are also free to be composers of prayer. They may not end up in a Sidur, but these are the prayers of our lips, and we should be encouraged to liberally compose prayers of our heart.
Thank you. Question here. Are we aware of any unconscious, and I might expand that to unintentional, rituals that are passed down by our ancestors?
I think I understand what that question means. You want to try and help me figure that out?
In my mind, I was going sort of more in with I guess similar to October 7th. I was thinking of the Holocaust, how maybe some individuals, they're from, something from their parents that is, brought down, they passed down as something, as I don't know, a remembrance of something they experienced, but it was never really meant to be. I don't have a very good example to think of, but that's what I was.
Right. I mean, I feel as if, thank you, Matt. I feel if I were talking about this face to face with the questioner, that I could fathom what they're getting at. But I'm not quite sure I understand. I certainly am aware that that rituals act on us, and might even, from one generation to another, might even create feelings of trauma. I certainly recall my first Tisha B'Av, when I was sitting on the ground at Camp Ramah reading from the Book of Lamentations, and I saw the older children crying, and I didn't know what's going on, and then soon after that we were seeing newsreels from the Holocaust. It was a very harsh introduction to Tisha B'Av, but I remember that practice, which seemed like a difficult practice, that it hurt me very much. So I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, that ritual practices that aren't appropriately presented, it can hold within them pain. I mean, certainly, if you're going to a Yisker service and you're not anticipating it, a remembrance service, and you're told, stand up now, remember people who've gone before you, and you're not ready for that, you're not prepared for it. It puts you in a very vulnerable psychological position. If, however, you know it's coming, and you made a point of getting to synagogue that day in order to say those prayers, among other people saying those prayers, then that becomes, in that context, it becomes an opportunity to be truly held up by a very wise traditional practice that recognizes that you want to remember your loved ones in your heart in random ways. You want to remember them on their day of death, and then you also want to remember them on particular holidays when the community comes together.
Thank you. Yeah, that was the direction that I was also taking that question. So if the person asked it wants to reply, they can in the next few minutes. Do you see that world jewelry has become more religious since October 7th, or perhaps more spiritual?
I don't think I have a way of measuring religiosity or spirituality. I know that lots and lots and lots of people came together in my synagogue in Charlottesville, Virginia, the days after October 7th to pray, to be together, to hug each other, to learn, to study. Has October 7th caused an uptick in synagogue attendance, or a downtick? I couldn't say, but from what I'm seeing in terms of web resources, I see that our spiritual communities in institutions and and groups such as the Haberman Institute are, and this has been going on since COVID, all of the Jewish communal world is working double time in order to get resources to Jews and to our Jewish allies at a time when we so need them. And this webinar right now, to me, is an indication, not I wouldn't say it's of greater spirituality or more religion, but this forum that, so many people can gather together, around the country, perhaps around the world, is a kind of, it's a very beautiful thing. And it comes out of response to hard stuff.
Yes, thank you. And sort of, we only have a couple of minutes left as a final question, and you can also add the thoughts that you want to leave us with. But what are some elements of what we've discussed today that you think people will turn to for the high holidays and the fall holidays? I guess, and then, or even the ones before then, I would add to their question, and if there's any pieces of that you want to leave us with this evening.
Here's a place where I just want to salute our rabbis and our cantors and our Jewish educators who are, with the coming of each holiday, say to themselves privately, I can't do this. I just can't do Yom. How am I going to do Yom HaAtzmaut? Israel independence. I just can't do it. And then they look inside the tradition and they look inside themselves and they say, and you say, like, I'm a leader. People are turning to me. I have to help people find resources and help people be held up. And so we will continue. Our leaders, and by leaders, I don't just mean rabbis, clergy, and educators. I mean our artists and our song makers and our poets and our installation people and our creatives and ad agencies. We're all going to be continuously turning to our tradition to go forward together with hope.
Yeah, exactly. With hope and resilience. So thank you once again, Rabbi Ochs, for sharing your expertise and all of these meaningful images and stories. It's a difficult narrative, but it's wonderful to have you with us to share. And thank you also for tackling all these many questions and insightful questions that our audience has asked us this evening.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you to everybody who took time tonight to come together.